Welcome back, folks. Thrilled to be with you today. I am, of course, Dale Jackson. You guys have been watching some of my streams for a while, and I appreciate you doing so. We will attempt to bring more to you every single day. You can hear my radio shows from 5 until 9 a.m. on WVNN in Huntsville, Alabama, and from 10 until noon in Chattanooga on Talk Radio 102.3. There's a couple of things I want to discuss with you guys today, and it's about Tim Walz. Not much of a surprise. Tim Walz has stepped down, but what's surprising is how hard the media has tried to make this a non-story. And we've seen this repeatedly. Damn Democrats got it good is a term that gets thrown around quite a bit, and I'm more than happy to use it because I think it fully encapsulates a lot of what we see in the American media. For example, Governor Tim Walz, the former vice presidential candidate, is stepping down, not running for governor anymore. And CNN covers this like someone's pushed him out of office. He's a victim, it appears. He is not a perpetrator of ill deeds or incompetence. No, he is a victim. Just listen to how this is framed by John Berman and Jeff Zeleny. Jeff Zeleny. That's his name. I can't remember it. All right, here we go.
Big breaking political news out of Minnesota. Governor Tim Walz, who of course was the Democratic nominee for vice president in 2024, has ended his re-election bid for governor. He is not going to run for re-election. This comes as pressure has been growing around this widening welfare fraud scandal. Now, Walz has not been accused of any wrongdoing, but it has been a growing political headache. Let's get right to CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny.
All right, now listen, I want to talk about this for a second. I want to make something pretty clear when this is being discussed, and it's pretty simple here. If this really wasn't that big of a deal, why would he step down? You don't step down when a scandal is encompassing you. You don't do that unless, of course, you're looking at a situation where you need to step down. It really is that simple. You do not step down from a scandal that is not enveloping you or going to take you down. If he was in the right and there were no issues, he would just ride it out. Now here he is stepping down, which goes to show you there is something here. Okay, politicians will try to ride out scandals that are real, but they step down from scandals that aren't. I don't think that's true. Nobody thinks that's true. But here we are, before we even get to the reporter, the anchor is sort of like, hey, he hasn't done anything wrong, guys. And this is going to be a theme of this whole story.
This is a wow this morning, or at least would have been if you had said it was going to happen, 2 or 3 months ago?
That's right, John. Good morning. Even perhaps 2 or 3 weeks ago, the reality is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had been insistent on running for a third term, which would have been unprecedented in and of itself. Minnesota has not elected a governor for 3 consecutive terms, but it is that deepening federal probe as well as this widening scandal. As you said, he is not implicated in this at all. This is actually somewhat old news in
It's old news, guys. That's why he's stepping down. He's stepping down because it's old news that has nothing to do with him. Doesn't that make sense? Who would disagree with such a thing? It's old news. That's why he's stepping down. You see, old news. Which again, nobody believes. And if these were Republicans we were talking about, you'd have 17 people on the desk and they'd be like, well, this is clearly an implication that this goes all the way to the top and to the bottom and all the way around. Anyone even associated with Republicans clearly doing something wrong. In this case, the guy stepping down did nothing wrong. We just make it clear he's stepping down for absolutely no reason.
Minnesota. This has been going on for years and years. The prosecution started back during the Biden administration, but over the holidays, it certainly did widen. There was a right-wing influencer who posted a viral video on social media.
They say dismissively, which let me summarize this for you. What they mean is somebody did the job the media should have been doing and actually looked into some of the stories that were coming out of Minnesota instead of just saying, oh, well, whatever, it's fine. It's a Democratic state. We're not really going to do anything about this. And then someone did, and now they're mad about it. And it went viral. Listen to how he says viral.
that quite literally went viral when the Vice President of the United States and the FBI Director leaned in on this, and it shined a brighter spotlight on really what had been some deep concerns among Minnesota Democrats, even about the wisdom of Governor Walz seeking a third term.
See, you guys, the Democrats were concerned about this scandal. They were about to totally start getting to the bottom of it. That's what they were concerned about. They were going to totally start doing it. Don't worry. They were going to get to the bottom of it. And Tim Walz, just had to get him out of the way. That's all. Sure.
They believe that this would hang over the entire reelection effort and perhaps even damage the Democratic Party, even though there is no suggestion that there was wrongdoing. However, this widening scandal happened on his watch.
No wrongdoing, guys. That's why he's stepping down. You see, he's just stepping down because it happened while he was governor. Therefore, he is going to step down. There's nothing that ties him to this, nothing he's said, nothing he's done behind the scenes to try to squash all of this. That's not why he's stepping down. He's stepping down because, Republicans are being mean to people in Minnesota, which is exactly what he said. He's going to fight them by stepping down from this campaign. Give me a break.
But we are getting his reasoning in a new statement this morning that's ahead of a news conference he's scheduled to hold in just a few hours. And let's take a look at one small portion of this, if we can, John. The governor writes this. He said, "As I reflected on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute I spent defending my own political interests would be a minute I can spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who prey on our differences."
He's almost there. He's almost talking about the criminals who prey on our generosity. Those would be the Somali fraudsters for the most part. But the people pointing out the Somali fraudsters, they're the real villains. They're preying on our differences. They're the villains here. That's how this is being framed. It sounds stupid, but it's true.
And the governor goes on in quite a lengthy statement, which we expect him to read at that news conference, which is going to be happening at 11 a.m. in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Which he took no questions at, by the way, which is another way everything is on the up and up when he took no questions. That's what you have to know. You need to know. Whenever you have nothing to hide, you take no questions. It's a well-known thing.
He goes on to take direct aim at President Donald Trump and allies of the president and Republican allies who have sought to make political hay out of this, if you will. Of course, they have a lot of this fraud is coming from some leaders of the Somali population in Minneapolis and Minnesota, longstanding members of the community. And the fraud goes back to the COVID time of federal money that was sent to the state of Minnesota. It was simply misused to the tune of the billions. So dozens have already been convicted.
That's nice that they've finally acknowledged we've gotten into the billions part of this. So it sounds like the right-wing video guy might be onto something, huh? Would this be being talked about on CNN if that guy had not done anything? Interesting.
Convicted. But again, the governor is taking direct aim at President Trump over this for politicizing this entire matter. John.
And these people are indignant to how dare the president politicize this entire matter, even though they've protected him solely for political reasons.
As I said, this is a big decision, one he did not seem to want to make, at least not a few weeks ago.
No, that's correct. He did not want to make it. He did not want to resign his campaign. That's a smart take by John Berman. If only he would have made like a quizzical face to the camera, it really would have sold the whole deal. So how did they miss this? Well, they didn't miss it. They actively covered it up. Drew Holden on Twitter, at Drew Holden 360, by the way, you can follow me there at the Dale Jackson as you can on all the various social media apps and sites and whatnot. He has a post out. He's a Substack guy, does a lot of coverage of the media. And he's got a pretty interesting post out that should be getting more attention. And it talks about how the media tried to put lipstick on this pig. His words, of course, not mine. But he rolls through it, I think, brilliantly. And we're going to take a look at this. If you scroll through some of this, you can see that he talks about things like the New York Times, who are mad that a video from Nick Shirley even existed. They accused him being in search of politically charged footage. You keep hearing that. Politically charged. Means inconvenient stuff for them. But look at how they covered the story. And he highlighted this stuff, not me. Okay? It starts off an intense White House response from a single viral video. A video purporting to expose extensive fraud at child care centers in Minnesota shows a relationship between the Trump administration and self-described citizen journalists. See, the problem here is the guy who uncovered the information, not the information itself. See, like how it's working here? Like how it's working? Go into the story, and they start talking about this, that producing viral content that aligns with MAGA policy. That's what he's known for. And that's bad. Not is it true, is it not true, but it helps MAGA. So therefore, it's bad. Continues. In search of politically charged footage, you can read there. Equipped with little more than iPhones, Mr. Shirley and other right-wing YouTubers and live streamers zigzag around the country and overseas in search of politically charged footage. Wow. So all they have is iPhones, and they're doing a better job than you guys are? Wow, they really suck, huh? What a bunch of villains. And then, if you roll through this, and I've got to move my little box here for a second, but if you scroll through this is what the Department of Children, Youth, and Families said in a statement about the video. We don't know if children were or were not present at the time the video was taken. Goes on to say, when our licensors have conducted visits to the buildings, there have been children present. So again, we're in full defense mode here, and the New York Times is interested in running that defense. But it wasn't just them. They did continue doing this, and they kept doing these things. Now, the New York Times a few weeks ago wrote an extensive piece about how fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system on Tim Walz' watch. Now, that was before right-wingers were being terrible about this. Okay? This was before the right-wingers were the villains here. They were doing a little bit of journalism on their own. Prosecutors say members of the Somali diaspora, a group with growing political power, were largely responsible. President Trump has drawn national attention to the scandal amid his crackdown on immigrants. Wow. Donald Trump said something was happening, then it was, and then Donald Trump pointed it out. What a bastard. And then we already had this one about the single viral video and how that's the real problem. He continues. There are more awful defenses of these child care centers that receive millions of taxpayer dollars. Here's the AP. Relying on the head of the now famous and allegedly closed ABC Learning Center, it's Learning Center, to suggest criticism is politically being used against Somali Muslims. That's what it's about. Somali Minnesotans. Minnesota. And they go on and look at it. A director of the ABC Learning Center says the viral video alleging fraud by influencer Nick Shirley is part of a political campaign against Somali Muslims. Okay, but is it real? Is it true? Yes or no? Oh, it's true? Okay, good. Quality Learning Center daycare finally fixes its sign after national outrage because it was a scam and everyone knows it. Now, a Minnesota state official came out and said that the Quality Learning Center had closed just over a week ago, but the daycare's owner said that they are open 2 to 10 p.m., which is when most daycares are open. I mean, it's kind of weird that you would suggest otherwise because that's when most daycares are open, right? And again, they just took the word of the fraudsters. A month ago, the AP had a piece out quoting the Somali community activists in Minnesota urging people to look at what we did around here. Where would America be without us? A community of refugees is stunned by White House limits. Wow, that's outrageous. Quote, look what we did here, said Nassar Hassan, a community health worker whose family came to Minnesota fleeing Somalia's civil war. Is that over, by the way? Can they go back? Speaking one day after the Trump administration slashed the number of refugees allowed into the United States because of us, this place is thriving. Minnesota's large Somali community was among the immigrant groups that helped revitalize the Lake Street corridor, which is long called out to newcomers to America, but scattered across the city are other communities and many other businesses built by refugees. This is sort of the narrative that they are in the process of building. Holden continues, but really got the outlets going from the Minnesota government, were comments from the Minnesota government that alleged child care centers were, quote, working as they should, despite half of them being actively under state investigation. They would defend anything if they need to, if it will help them fight those dastardly evil Republicans. Minnesota Department finds child care centers targeted in viral video operating normally. Did they? You'll notice he highlighted operating as expected. But if you go a little bit into the story, as he did, the department noted that it has ongoing investigations into 4 of the centers and 55 investigations into providers that receive funding from the Child Care Assistance Program, which it oversees. By the way, how do you get this money? We have people all the time complaining that parents don't have health care and things like this. Is this where all that money's going? It appears so. It really does. I mean, you've got $17.4 million referenced here going to 9 centers. That's a lot of money. What is it for? Well, apparently there were kickbacks going to parents as well. They continued. Minnesota child care centers accused of wrongdoing were operating as expected, said one report. So again, this is interesting. Drew Holden says this is not anything but naked propaganda. And he's right about that. He refers to it as propaganda. He continues. Minnesota Child Care Center at the heart of widespread fraud allegations fueled by a viral video were operating as expected. Children were present at all sites except for one. That site was not yet open for families the day when inspectors arrived. You know, another one of those daycares that doesn't open until like 4 p.m. You know how that normally works. That's usually how it goes. But it gets so much better. It gets so much better. CBS News. 9 Minnesota child care centers discuss in viral video operating as expected. That's interesting. It's a very interesting way of framing this. 9 of them are operating as expected. That's interesting. 9 of them. What about the rest of them? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They took some notes from the city and they said, hey, everything's fine. But if you go any deeper into the story, the Minnesota Star Tribune. We went to the daycares where Nick Shirley, Nick Shirley did. Here's what we found. Some of the 10 daycares, in the YouTube content, blasted for having no children, invited reporters in to see for themselves. Wow, that's awfully nice of them. What a great story. But listen to this. The Minnesota Star Tribune visited all 10 facilities and found children inside 4 of them. Now, just again, I want you to pay attention to this. The Minnesota Star Tribune also visited all 10 facilities and found children inside 4 of them. 6 other facilities were either closed or employees did not open their doors. That's odd, isn't it? So, more than half of them were not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And the story that got written was, everything's cool. Then we did the thing we always do whenever anyone gets criticized. We say that the real story is the threats. You see, the criticism that came in is leading to threats. So you can't criticize these people. See what it says? Somali daycare centers face threats and how Trump could save the Obamacare subsidies. This is a nonsensical thing on the second part, but Somali daycare centers are now facing threats. And that's the biggest story of this. It continues. CNN said of the potential fraudsters, this is from Drew Holden again, and the government potentially supporting them, say there's no fraud. And CNN says, well, there's no fraud. And here, I mean, it's just crazy. Look at this. Look at this story. CNN says there's zero daycare fraud in Minnesota. None. And if you know that story, you may remember how that came to be. They called and got one person to call them back. One person called them back. And when that one person called them back, they then declared that everything was fine and everything was working great. They went out of their way to debunk Nick Shirley as opposed to covering the actual story. They went after Nick Shirley, and Drew Holden points this out here. Plenty of shooting. The Messenger, Nick Shirley. And he rolls through it. Here we go. Who is Nick Shirley? The 23-year-old MAGA journalist whose Minnesota fraud story went viral. Who is he? Who is he? Oh my God, we got to figure this out. Okay, let's take a look at it. Shirley and others like him present themselves as the future of journalism. They often claim the lack of traditional editing, fact checks, and guardrails make them more trustworthy. Meanwhile, the audience for mainstream media has been falling for years, and public trust in traditional journalists is at historic lows. Well, why the fuck is that? Could it be this story right here? Could that be the issue? Oh, I think it might be. I think it could possibly be. I don't know. I'm not very smart. I'm one of those more independent people. So, man, who knows what could have happened here? But the real story is that MAGA leaders are promoting this. That's the real story. That MAGA leaders are promoting this. Not that there's bad stuff going on. No. Look at this. It's part of what many on the right say is widespread government assistance fraud perpetuated by the Somali community there. You notice, again, it's always alleged. And then they wonder why people don't trust journalists, because the journalists never get to the end of it. They're trying to shoot the person who's complaining about it, who's making the points. They're going after him. That's what they're trying to do. And here they are again, talking about lack of evidence. Not that they're going to go out and try to find the evidence. They're not interested in that part of the story. That is not what they're going to do. They are not going to go find that story. They are going to attack anyone that dare talk about it. That's what they're going to actually do. Drew Holden continues. When the cycle coverage moved to the morning phase, CBS News lamented that Minnesota allegedly lacked the teeth to hold the fraudulent accountable. Given the billions of dollars available for stealing, I doubt that. That's what he says. But that is the story they tried to tell. Honestly, the past 10 years show that Minnesota has lacked the teeth to properly vet attendance records and go after possible fraudsters proactively. So at least we're getting to the point where, okay, maybe we're acknowledging there's some fraud here. But okay, that's a step in the right direction. It is a step in the right direction. But you've probably seen this headline before. The blame on all of this, who does it go to? Well, I think you all know. The blame on all of this actually goes to conservatives. Privatization and a lack of oversight creates a vicious cycle. They had to steal. They had no choice but to steal. Here's how that story works. The internet is currently awash in right-wing propaganda about alleged fraud in Minnesota's social services program. Unsurprisingly, you can thank a mendacious right-wing influencer for kicking off this hysteria. Also, unsurprisingly, the Trump administration is making the most of the opportunity to kick a blue state in the teeth. You know, that's an interesting way of framing that. But you know that they didn't have to do that, right? They could have actually policed their own fraud. That would have been a way that they probably could have handled some of this. But nah, the bad guys are the Republicans. And Holden closes with this. The news cycle seems to be moving faster than ever, but let's not lose the memory of how the legacy media reliably rush in as firefighters whenever a Democratic interest goes up in flames. That is the absolute truth here. That is the absolute truth. That is exactly what has happened here. And every single time we have these conversations, That's what this is about. It is about how they can defend these people under any circumstance. The criticism itself is the problem. It leads to violence. It leads to hate. It leads to anger. It's never about holding the people doing bad accountable. You will see that, you will notice that, and we will all one day maybe understand that these people have been fraudulent from the very beginning. You went out and watched how this one guy blew this entire argument up, that Tim Walz was a good governor, that there was nothing going on there in Minnesota. Blew the whole thing up, and the media had to be drugged kicking and screaming, and it took down a governor in less than 2 weeks. And the American media is still pretending that they're doing a good job. And I'll remind you, I think it's worth going back to this, the beginning of this story. If you go back to the very beginning of this story that we started with today, it's John Berman sitting there being a smug little prick on CNN and telling you, hey, this isn't really that big of a deal. Just listen to it.
Big breaking political news out of Minnesota.
Really
Governor Tim Walz, who of course was the Democratic nominee for vice president in 2024, has ended his re-election bid for governor. He is not going to run for re-election. This comes as pressure has been growing around this widening welfare fraud scandal. Now, Walz has not been accused of any wrongdoing, but it has been a growing political headache. Let's get right to CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff
Who will
Zeleny.
also defend Tim
This is a
Walz.
wow this morning, or at least would have been if you had said it was going to happen, 2 or 3 months ago?
That's right, John. Good morning. Even perhaps 2 or 3 weeks ago, the reality is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had been insistent on running for a third term, which would have been unprecedented in and of itself. Minnesota has not elected a governor for 3 consecutive terms, but it is that deepening federal probe as well as this widening scandal. As you said, he is not implicated in this at all.
Just not at all, guys. We just got to keep reminding you, he hasn't done anything wrong. No, he's just the governor of the state, but nothing falls back on him. Isn't that interesting? Every single time it's the exact same angle. The people asking the questions are the real villains. That's how they tried to frame it. And they almost would have got away. They would almost got away with it if it wouldn't have been for those meddling kids, right? The real villains here. Nick Shirley. And all those other people who went out and saw this happening and didn't look the other way like the trained journalists that we're supposed to trust. There's a reason why we don't trust the media. This is it. This is that reason. Thank you very much for being here. Like, follow, subscribe, do all those things you're supposed to do. I will, of course, be back every day this year trying to do some sort of live stream. May not get it all done, but we'll try. Follow us here. Thanks for being here.